Hi, I'm Rob from B&H, and in this video we're checking out Elektron's new 4-voice analog tabletop synthesizer called the Analog 4. Swedish company Elektron has been making some exciting instruments with a distinctly electronic flavor for a while now, including the mono machine, the machine drum, and the Octatrack sampler that we looked at last year. And this new synth certainly continues that tradition with real analog oscillators and filters under precise digital control, an onboard 6-track step sequencer, 6 arpeggiators, and customizable data knobs for some exciting real-time performance control. The Analog 4 is a powerful instrument. If you make electronic music, EDM, techno, dubstep, ambient, whatever, this might be your new best friend. The Analog 4 looks a lot like the Octatrack. In fact, it's the same size, and indeed the PL1 dust cover fits both machines. The metal chassis is solidly built with a connection for the lump-in-line power supply and the USB port for computer connection or MIDI keyboards on the back, along with MIDI in, out, and through ports, 1/4-inch stereo unbalanced inputs, and 1/4-inch stereo balanced outputs, and the headphone jack. Also back here are the CV and gate outputs that allow you to control external instruments, like older analog gear, for example, from the Analog 4's sequencer. The top of the unit is a veritable cornucopia of buttons and knobs, along with a rather small backlit LCD screen. The buttons often do double duties, so for example, the white keys on the 1-octave+C keyboard open up various menus when used in conjunction with the function key. Yes, that is a keyboard. You can actually play melodies on it, but the buttons aren't velocity sensitive and it's not really designed for nuanced playing. It's more used to enter note information into the sequencer. And of course, it can be transposed up and down over a 5-octave range. There are 12 knobs on the front panel, a volume knob for the stereo out and headphones, and 11 endlessly turning data knobs, the level knob for track levels and general data entry, and 10 macro performance knobs. As the name implies, the Analog 4 is a 4-voice synth, allowing you to play 4 different monophonic sounds at one time, one on each of the 4 synth tracks. At the moment, it's not possible to play any of the tracks polyphonically, but that may well be possible in the future since Elektron's operating system updates often add significant features. The Analog 4 is actually an analog and digital hybrid. This means that each voice has 2 digitally controlled analog oscillators and 2 analog filters, a 4-pole low pass and a 2-pole multimode filter. There's also an analog overdrive circuit for subtle warmth or not so subtle distortion if you prefer. The amplifier is also analog, but the LFOs and envelopes are digital, as is the noise generator. This combination effectively yields the rich, fat sounds of analog circuitry with the ease and consistency of digital control. On top of that analog sound-generating awesomeness, the Analog 4 has a really powerful effect engine with 3 very solid effects: the wide shift chorus, the saturator delay, and the super void reverb. They sound quite good for built-in effects, particularly the reverb, which is capable of some very nice, rich, and quite lengthy decays. They sound so good, in fact, that you may want to use them on external audio sources, and you can do that because of those additional 1/4-inch inputs in the back. Like the Elektron Octatrack, the Analog 4 is a very deep instrument, and frankly there is a bit of a learning curve, but let me try to give you a rough idea of how programming the sequencer actually works. I've got 6 tracks to work with. The first 4 are for synth sounds, track 5 is for the effects, while track 6 is reserved for the CV and gate controls for triggering external instruments. Sounds on the Analog 4 are arranged into kits. There are 8 banks, each with 16 kits. Let's bring the tempo to 122 beats per minute, and we'll start with a kick drum on track 1. I'll load one of the preset sounds. In this instance, it's BD240. There are 2 recording modes in the Analog 4, grid mode and live mode. I want to program triggers for a 4-to-the-floor kick, so that's easy to do in grid mode, and I'll activate that mode simply by hitting the record button. All I have to do is light the trigger on where I want the kick. It's triggering note C4, but this sound isn't very pitch dependent. Now I'm going to add a bass line. I'll switch to track 2 and load up a bass patch. I'm going to play the bass part on the keys in real time, so we'll do that in live mode, which is activated by hitting the record and play button at the same time. The part that I played is placed in the sequencer on a micro-timed grid with 384 steps between every 16th note, and that resolution is so fine it sounds basically unquantized. If I want to quantize my playing to 16th notes, I can dial that in with the Quantize Value, and I can also swing patterns up to 80%. Let's overdub a 2-bar melody pattern. My first 2 tracks have been 1-bar phrases, but this part is a 2-bar pattern, so we'll go to the scale menu and extend the triggers from the 16 you get in a 1-bar pattern to 32 notes for a 2-bar pattern. I'm in normal mode on the scale menu, so all the tracks in a pattern have the same length, but in the advanced mode, each track can have a different length. By the way, the maximum number of steps in the sequencer is 64. I'll go into live, record again, and play the part. And I can do that same thing again, but with a 4th sound on track 4. If I don't like what I've played, I can erase the triggers by holding the No key and the track key while the pattern cycles. Now I'll reprogram the notes in grid mode by hitting only the record button. I select the bar I want to change, and while holding the note on the keyboard, I hit the trigger button that corresponds with that 16th note. In addition to simple note on and off functions, the Analog 4 allows me to tie additional parameters to the triggers of the step sequencer. Those are called parameter locks or P-locks. To make the note longer, for example, I can go to the note page, and in grid record mode, I hold the trigger button down and adjust the note length for that knob, and now that note length is tied to that trigger. P-locks work for other parameters as well, filter settings, envelope changes, you name it. Also, they don't have to be tied to note triggers. By hitting the function button and the trigger key, I create a noteless trigger that only has parameter information. Patterns can be strung together into chains, and chains and patterns are sequenced in song mode to form whole compositions. Sounds can also be changed per sequencer step. These are called sound locks, and they're a good way to get more mileage out of limited tracks or program some variations in the sound. On this track, for example, I've got a kick drum and 2 different bass sounds being triggered. In addition to the sequencer, the Analog 4 also has 6 built-in arpeggiators, 1 for each track. And the parameters are adjustable. The pattern can go up, down, cycle between the 2, random, and more. And I can adjust the timing, the note lengths, range, legato, and other settings. Now, I've saved one of the Analog 4's best features for pretty late in the video, and that is the performance macro knobs that allow you to tweak up to 5 different parameters on multiple tracks with the turn of a single knob. The 10 knobs are labeled A through J and are completely customizable. I want to take a second and play a couple of the demo kits so you can get an idea of the kind of radical alterations you can get with these macros. Now let's take a closer look at the way the macros are set up in that last demo. The performance screen gives me some idea of what the knobs do, but if I go into the performance setup page, I can see exactly how each knob is configured. Let's take a look at macro knob A, which has been named higher for this particular performance. Now I can see all 5 of the parameters that this one knob changes and which tracks those changes are occurring on. So this higher knob is doing several things. On track 1, it adjusts the tuning of oscillator 1, but it's also making changes on track 4, which has a hi-hat sound on it. It's changing the fade time on the digital noise generator, and it also increases the send of that track to the delay effect. And it's also increasing the detuning of oscillator 1 on track 3. Now once I'm in the performance configuration page, the level knob will function as the macro I'm adjusting, while the top row of knobs adjust the parameter being affected, and I can change the track being affected by pressing the knob. The second row of buttons adjust the depth of the change, and they can be either positive or negative values. I can also press down on the level knob to make the macro bipolar, meaning that by turning to the left, I'm sending negative values, while turning to the right sends positive values. And we've only looked at one knob. I've got 9 more to work with. The second knob, labeled Trippy, adjusts the oscillator tuning on tracks 1 and 3, filter frequency and amp volume on track 2, and most significantly, the multiplier setting for LFO1 on track 3. The knob labeled Break adjusts filter frequency and depths, the fade of our little hi-hat sound, and the send to a delay. Put together, it creates a really cool break effect. I was able to dial in the break effect kind of slowly, but I dialed it out really fast. And I can do that because the performance knobs indent, and when I do that, the values change much faster. It's a really cool feature. So hopefully this overview hits most of the highlights on the Elektron Analog 4. Obviously this is not going to be your go-to instrument for piano sounds, but if you're looking to expand the electronic side of your arsenal, this analog synth delivers some devastating sounds. I'm Rob from B&H, and thanks for watching.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.